You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions, episode 113. And now, here are Jeff and Ian.
Welcome back to the Tricorder Transmissions. Today, we are going to be covering Gold Key Comics, issue number 24, The Trial of Captain Kirk. And before we jump into this issue, I want to mention really quickly that we are recording this issue on the 50th anniversary of the original series, September 8th, 2016. And it sort of just kind of happened due to a little bit of an overrun on our recording that we did yesterday. We were supposed to do 2 episodes in one day, and it turned out that we went so long that we said, well, why don't we just record the next one tomorrow? And it just happened to be the anniversary of Star Trek. So, oh, by the way, I should say, I'm your host, Jeff Hewlett, and with me is Mr. Ian Adams.
Hello.
So, you want to chime in a little bit on our recording on the 50th anniversary of TOS?
Yeah, well, what better way to spend it than talking Star Trek, right?
Yeah, really. Yeah, even an obscure comic book still counts.
Yeah, that's sort of the legacy right there, is that 50 years later, we're still talking about it. We're still picking apart every little thing, just trying to get every little bit of meat off that bone,
Yeah. Well, the thing that really amazes me, and I was thinking about this earlier today, that 50 years after the airing of the first episode of TOS in the United States, I believe the first episode aired in Canada yesterday, but today is widely regarded as the anniversary. But it amazes me that how much technology, the thing that Star Trek predicted so much about our present day, how much our current day technology has enhanced the Star Trek community. There's so many podcasters out there. There are so many fan filmmakers out there, bloggers and fans who write their own fan fiction and publish online. I mean, the technology we have today is enabling the Star Trek community to continue to grow Star Trek 50 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it was really just the internet being a thing that kind of kept Star Trek going in those years after Enterprise was canceled, because we had nowhere else to turn to but to talk to each other. And that's not at all a bad thing. I think what it did was it really kind of brought us a lot closer than we had been. Because, for example, I wouldn't have even gone to Star Trek Las Vegas or anything, probably, if not for the internet. We or at the very least, I certainly wouldn't have met you. Well, not certainly, but
pretty much.
It was the internet that brought me to this whole group, and so it's had a heck of an impact.
Oh, for sure. And without the internet, we wouldn't be recording this show right now. So,
right.
By the miracle of Skype and voice connections, it's incredible what we can do.
Talking from New Jersey to Texas, and just like it's nothing.
Yeah, and it sounds like we're in the same rooms. It's unbelievable. And to think back on watching the original series when I was a kid, in the syndication years in the 70s, and seeing the technology they had on the show that inspired me to be the computer guy that I wound up being today. Thinking back on all of that and realizing what we're doing right now with our smartphones and with our computers, and it's amazing.
It's not just technology, though. I mean, Star Trek innovated in a lot of ways, and not just with storytelling either, which, obviously we could go on for days about. But, things like
all of that.
Yeah, like just for example, the first run syndication of The Next Generation. That was a first. No one had really done that before, and it it's one of the things that made the Next Generation so popular, is because, all these stations all over the country and indeed all over the world had, were able to buy in to these syndicated deals to get Star Trek on their stations. And it just made it brought it to even more people, made it even more popular. And one of the things that is great about that is that each time a Star Trek comes out, it's somebody's first Star Trek.
Yep.
And they'll fall in love with it, and then they go back and they watch all the other stuff. And then, here we are. It doesn't matter what your first Star Trek is. Everyone's got one, but we all love Star Trek, and that's the thing that really matters, I think.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And we talked about this with the Kelvin Universe movies. And I know Heather was very, very interested in meeting people who, at the convention, whose first experience with Star Trek was one of the Kelvin Universe films. And if there was somebody who wound up being inspired to go to a Star Trek convention based on their first viewing being a Kelvin Universe movie and expanding into the rest of the universe, that's a pretty cool indicator of just how powerful Star Trek is.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, we are actually here to discuss a completely different topic, and this was a
well, it's still Star Trek.
Yeah, it's still Star Trek, but it's a different topic. It is a comic book. It is the 24th issue of Gold Key Star Trek Comics entitled The Trial of Captain Kirk. So we will get back to that here, and it is, again, Arnold Drake returns to the series, writer Arnold Drake. He's written issues prior to this one, and he will write more issues in the future. Our artist is still Alberto Giolitti, yet again. Published in May of 1974, 32 pages. Start date is 1926.2, sometime in the 2260s. And I must admit to all of you listeners out there that I have been remiss. This issue is the 5th issue since the price hike on these Gold Key comics. It went up to 20 cents 5 issues ago with issue number 19. So I have been remiss in mentioning the fact that the price went up, I think it was 15 cents back then to 20 cents now. So, well, not now, but now in 1974 now. Yeah, inflation was taking effect and the comic was steadily rising and rising. And I won't even mention comic prices today, but 20 cents would be quite a bargain compared to what we pay for comics now. But, we've talked about author Arnold Drake in prior episodes, so I won't go too deep into his backstory, but he is an American comic writer. He was one of the first pioneers of what is today referred to as a graphic novel. He started out with a book called It Rhymes with Lust, and he's written comics across tons of different genres, just like a lot of our Gold Key writers, including war comics, horror, romance, superheroes, westerns, crime, and sci-fi. And he worked on a total of 20 Gold Key issues, some prior to this one, and some still yet to come.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the graphic novel, widely credited is Will Eisner with A Contract with God, because he was the first one to call his collected book a graphic novel. And yet, that came out in, I want to say 78, whereas Rhymes with Lust was 1950. I mean, that was a lot earlier. So, when you say pioneered, he really pioneered it. No one was really doing long form comics at that time in the 1950s.
Oh, for sure. Even in the 70s. Some of these especially these Gold Keys are a great example of that. That we constantly talk about how rushed these things feel and how maybe the stories would be better if they were explored over multiple issues or a longer issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the stuff that he's done besides that is actually quite interesting. I mean, he's done some really, really influential stuff. Or I should say he did. He unfortunately died a few years ago, back in 2007. But Yeah, he had an immense impact. He basically came up with the Doom Patrol, which was a superhero team that in the 80s they got a series on DC's Vertigo imprint that was I've loved that when I was a kid. It was really just off and cool, and um, it was great. A lot of people here don't know he's the co-creator of the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh, get out! Nice.
Yeah, so he was the writer, and then the artist, whose name escapes me, Gene Colan. They created it together, and I mean, the Guardians of the Galaxy are huge now thanks to the movie.
Yeah,
And yeah, and he wrote this this comic that we're about to go do. He did Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos, which is a big World War II series. He did a run on the X-Men. He did not just Star Trek, but he did a couple other Gold Key series that were adaptations of TV series, which were Dark Shadows and the Twilight Zone, which were two very, very cool series. I mean, this guy was just all over the place, and I think that makes it kind of special that he also dipped his toes into Star Trek.
Yeah, this reminds me, it makes me think about how if you look at TOS, one of the great things about TOS was they brought in so many great science fiction writers to write episodes of the original series. And now looking at Gold Key, we're seeing these comic writers who wrote before and went on to write very iconic and popular comics after Gold Key. So that Gold Key shares something, I think, with TOS in the writing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and talk about pushing boundaries, right? Like, not only being one of the first people to ever publish a graphic novel as we would know them today. I mean, he was one of the co-creators of Dead Man, which was the first comic to ever really depict drug use after the Comics Code Authority came into being. So that was like a really hugely controversial thing. That was, that's the sort of thing like right up there with, the Kirk Uhura kiss, in terms of controversy, right? Like narcotics were strictly verboten by the Comics Code Authority. So the fact that he was able to actually get that through, in a time when the Comics Code Authority was really a power to be reckoned with, that kind of speaks to the kind of writer that he was.
Yeah, that's incredible. And that kind of reminds me a little bit of the original Harlan Ellison script for City on the Edge of Forever, which included drug use and drug dealing. Yeah. And how that was shot down. So interesting that we have the same type of thing happening with a writer for Gold Key on a non-Star Trek series. But it's interesting to see how these bodies who govern the content and publishing of these creative works can have such a profound influence on the content itself, and sometimes allow things to slip through, which wind up being so iconic, like the Kirk and Uhura kiss that you just mentioned.
Right.
So very, very cool. And I love how a lot of this stuff gets tied back to Star Trek.
Yeah.
So very, very awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the cover of this issue before we do our spoiler check. And this is one of the Gold Keys that I'm really not a huge fan of this cover. It is very bizarre. And
it is a bit weird, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if this accurately reflects, again, what goes on inside the actual issue itself. So we've got a green disembodied floating head that looks kind of like, to me, it looks like a cross between Merman from the He-Man series and a human. So you've got this merman eyes and the fin on top of the green head, and then a human nose, mouth, and ears.
Yeah, and the eyes, I can't help but see them not as sort of insect segmented eyes, but as like, goggles, and he kind of comes across as like a mad scientist in this shot to me.
Oh
Maybe it's the
yeah,
dramatic lighting.
yeah, and the expression on his face, the mouth, the position of the mouth and the lips, the
Right,
teeth, kind of makes him look like he's diabolical.
right. But all of the elements in this though do appear in the thing. There's this weird tentacled creature. Um, there's these flying kind of robot looking suits. That's all in there. It's just kind of put together in I'd say kind of a haphazard way.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's kind of different pieces of
Yeah,
the issue kind of smashed together. As you go through the issue and read through it, you'll see where each one of these elements comes from.
right.
I don't want to spoil any of it yet, but that's a good observation for sure. Except
Yeah,
for the
like
flames in the background, I'm not sure where that comes from.
yeah, that I don't doesn't ring a bell for me, but yeah, I mean, as opposed to say the last issue where that scene was almost verbatim a scene that occurred in the comic.
Exactly. Yeah, this is a departure from that. And is it? Do you know if it's the same cover artist?
Yeah, George Wilson. He's the same guy that's been doing all of them. That pulpy guy, as I
This is pulpy.
tend to refer to him. Yeah, it's very, very much so. And it's still like it's a very nicely painted cover.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Is a lot of great detail, especially on the armor, the armored flying suits. The shading on them
Yeah,
is excellent. Excellent.
absolutely. You definitely get the feeling that it is metal.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And yeah, the little jet packs they have on their back. I like the thrusters that
Hmm.
are on the suit that is closest to the viewer. Although we will, spoiler alert, we will find that there are actually only two of them in the issue,
Right.
not three. So that's an interesting oversight.
Yeah.
And I didn't really realize it until you just said what you said before, but the tentacle thing that you see here, the purple tentacle thing, is actually a monster that appears in the issue of the comic.
Yeah.
When I first read this, I just thought it was kind of a tentacle nebula type of thing that was
Like a
floating
spatial
in
anomaly
space.
kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Some kind of an organism in space. I didn't make any kind of a connection to a creature that existed in the comic book. So good realization here for me. Tagline on the cover: Sky pirates raid the stars, and Captain Kirk is charged with treason.
Yeah.
Cover has nothing to do with that.
Yeah. But I was just going to say, which is interesting because you definitely don't get the sense that any of that is happening, except that you might be guessing that one of the figures or more are space pirates.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe one of the robotic looking guys was a space pirate, but I think it's worth mentioning that a prior Gold Key comic also featured tried and true space pirates in a ship that looked like a flying buccaneer. So
Oh yeah.
the space pirates in this are nowhere near as cool as the space
No.
pirates in the prior issue.
But they do have something going for them that I appreciate, but I don't want to
Okay, let's not flip the
spoil
hands.
anything. So yeah.
Yeah, let's not flip the hands just yet. So, speaking of flipping hands, let's stop here and give our listeners the spoiler check. So, anything from here on out, besides the things that I've just spoiled inadvertently, anything from here on out is going to be considered spoilers. So, if you don't want us to spoil this issue for you, stop us now, unplug, go find this comic, read it, and then come back and listen to us talk. And we are going to start our commentary on issue number 24 of Gold Key Comics in 3, 2, 1. All right,
Ding.
so we will start with the teaser page, which in this case is completely removed from the cover art, with the exception of the two robotic-looking entities that are standing in the foreground, seem to look a lot like the ones on the cover, although slightly different. A little
Yeah,
more
they don't have
detailed.
the jetpacks.
No jetpacks, and I think their bodies are slightly more detailed, especially around the joints. They seem to have a little more. I'm not sure how to put it, but the joining of their arms and their knees have a little bit more ordainment on them, so it's kind of neat looking. There's some teaser text here. I'll quickly read before we talk a little bit more about the dialogue and what's actually going on in this shot. So it says, a brilliant service record and a heroic commander face public disgrace and imprisonment as Captain Kirk battles vainly against a shadowy conspiracy. Can he and the crew of the Starship Enterprise crack the mystery before the prison door shuts behind him? And I believe, I really want to believe that the word vainly is not really the word they meant to use here. I want to think it was supposed to be valiantly. I'm not sure how Kirk would battle vainly.
No, I think they meant like in vain.
Oh, good call. Yeah, because I was thinking valiantly, but no, in vain actually sounds right for at least the first part of the issue.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, possible. So let's see. So we've got two blue shirt bodies laying in what look like maybe cryogenic tubes or some sort of
electronic sarcophagi.
Oh boy, you had to go there. They're not mummies though. They're not mummies. We can't see their faces. They look relatively identical, but the two robots, or seemingly robots, in the foreground have some speech bubbles who give away that the fact that it's Dr. McCoy and Mr. Spock that are laying in these two tubes, and somehow these robots are either them or they've been transferred into these robots. We're not quite exactly sure what's going on here. It says something about their brain patterns being inside the robots. We don't have a lot of detail at this point as to what's going on, but we'll find out more as the issue progresses. But for some reason, the robots themselves don't look very Star Trek to me. They look like 60s robots for sure, but they don't look Star Trek robotic to me.
Yeah, they're kind of they kind of remind me of like jousting armor, like that kind of plate mail, like the way that that they rest on them, and they've got the pauldrons and the gauntlets and the little kind of waistcoat looking thing. The helmets don't look like that, but the armor itself definitely gave me that impression.
Yeah, that's a good observation. On the hands, the non-articulated hands kind of remind me of that as well. So you would just be holding the jousting spear. You didn't need a lot of motion in your fingers. All you need to do is be able to grip that spear, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, but I really like the artwork on those robots, though. They look really, really cool. Now, the machinery in the background leaves a little to be desired.
Yeah, but there's a doorway in the background that, just based on the style of it, kind of speaks to me that they're on the Enterprise, because it looks like that doorway to the shuttle bay.
Oh, right. It's not a standard doorway. That's for sure. But it is an odd shape, but it does kind of look like that shuttle bay door. Just the other machinery and the coloration of the wall is what throws me off. The wall is yellow with an orange trim, and there's some machinery with an orange metallic background behind it next to that door, which seems like an odd coloration choice to me.
Yeah, but I mean, they've already got so much blue going on with the two blue shirts in, a lot of the glass and the highlights on the armor, and then that big blue, the Trial of Captain Kirk title in the top left corner. Maybe they felt like they had to go more into the red spectrum.
Yeah, I guess that's actually a good point. I think the page itself, this teaser page would be a little bit dull if they actually colored the walls gray, as they would
Yeah,
be on the
it'd be kind of
Enterprise.
monochromatic, you know.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I'm sure they wanted it to pop a little bit more. So definitely the color of the walls makes the robots and those cryogenic or stasis pods or whatever they are pop off the page a little
Yeah.
bit better than they would have. So good point. Good point. Anything else you want to say about the teaser page before we jump into the story?
No, I'm anxious to get into it.
Yeah, I'm anxious to get into it too, and I just before we do, I want to just say to the listeners out there, the story of this comic to me feels a little disjointed. So I want to say ahead of time, if my reading of the synopsis of this story feels a little disjointed, don't hold it against me. I tried my best to make it sound as coherent as possible, but even having read this comic multiple times, I still kind of had trouble following some of what was going on. So forgive me in advance for this. So let's jump into this, Ian. So we've got a captain's log opening up this issue as we do with all of the other ones, which reads Captain's Log, Stardate 1926.2, approaching the Ferris asteroid belt on special assignment as per Command Order J 1786.
Yeah, and the artwork here, those do not look like Ferris asteroids. Ferris is an iron.
Yes, Ferris is an iron, but I'm going to hold off my commentary about this panel until we get through the opening section of this comic, because I actually kind of like these floating crystal things. But so the Enterprise, as stated in the captain's log, is on a special assignment in what they call a Ferris asteroid belt that 100 years ago was the location of a mining rush when it was discovered that the asteroids were almost pure iron. So the operations established whole cities around that area overnight to strip mine the asteroids. And when it was discovered that a possible destruction of the belt by the mining would endanger neighboring planetary orbits, all the mining operations were promptly outlawed. So Kirk mentions that there's one large pirate operation that is still operating there and has eluded Starfleet's capture. Kirk and Spock regard a recognizable large asteroid that is oddly camel-shaped, and notice that there's a nearby rock on it that's not on any charts that they have of the belt. So in a very strange move, Kirk and Scotty decide to go exterior of the ship and get on their spacesuits and make an excursion to investigate this rock. And after determining that it's just another hunk of iron, Scotty decides that he is going to disobey the law and use his phaser to carve off a souvenir. When he does that, suddenly the asteroid begins to shake and then changes its direction and begins to fly away. They discover that it's actually a ship that is disguised as an asteroid. So Kirk and Scotty jump off and float away as the ship flies off into the distance. So Kirk, back aboard the Enterprise, which is now in pursuit of this ship, announces to it via communications that they are the Starship Enterprise and they will attack, but they would prefer to avoid any sort of combat in lieu of a peaceful solution. So the bandit ship instead fires at the Enterprise, and the Enterprise is forced to take evasive action and return fire, thus destroying the rogue pirate ship. So Enterprise returns to headquarters. Kirk is promptly placed under arrest and brought before an inquiry board, which is held in what they call the Great Supreme Council Hall. So the chairman of the council is a guy by the name of Vice Chairman Fado and Vice Chairman Hajara. Fado states that Kirk is charged with accepting money in return for protecting the pirate iron mining ring. So let's pull the ship over, as we often do, to talk about all of the things that happened in this first section. I have a huge amount of notes here, Ian. So I love the actual depiction of these crystalline formations that they call ferrous asteroids, which are actually
Right.
not ferrous asteroids.
Yeah, they don't look like it, and yet everyone's there mining iron, but these look like just sort of multicolored crystals. And yeah, I kind of feel like the going with iron was just a weird choice.
Yeah, I don't see how iron would be as valuable
Yeah,
in
it's
Star
like
Trek times as it would have been in maybe back in the times when this comic was written.
right. I mean, it's the 26th most common element in the universe, being number 26 on the periodic table. It's you find it all over the place. We can find it in our own asteroid belt. We can find it on, all the terrestrial planets. Well, that we know of, at least on Earth and Mars, but most likely Venus and Mercury as well. You can find it out in the Kuiper belt and the Oort cloud. It's all over the place. And yet I kind of feel like if they had matched what they were mining to the look of the asteroids, which are very crystalline, make them some sort of valuable crystal, heck, maybe even dilithium, that would have assuaged me much more. And sort of as I was reading it, I was just kind of pretending that it was dilithium and not iron, and then it all sort of came together for me.
Great point, because I was just about to say, I had this written down. I think this was a perfect opportunity for them to make up a rare element or rare metal like pergium, right, that we've heard about, that the Federation needs for some purpose. I think picking a very common element that was known to the readers of the comic maybe crippled the story a bit in my mind. So another weird thing that I noticed here, and this is a very, very strange artistic choice. In the bottom panel on this first page of the comic, so for us it's page 3, for you guys out there it's page 2, but there's a disembodied Kirk's head
Yeah.
next to some dialogue. And this is not something that I see very often in Gold Key. I've seen some bizarre artistic anomalies like this in the past, like in a couple of issues there were captain's logs with with a depiction of a book, an open book next to them.
Right.
So I don't know what was going through Giolitti's head when he decided to make these stylistic choices, because they're not consistent. And you would think that if it was the same artist doing these things, that it would be relatively consistent.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of on the face of it, it's to let you know that it's Kirk talking.
Yes.
Because in the panel right before it, Kirk's the last one talking, and so you might expect that it would then go back to Sulu for the next lines. But yeah, it is a little odd, but at the same time, that's actually a technique that's used a lot more common these days. So maybe it was something that was actually directed by Arnold Drake, the writer.
Yeah, good call. Maybe it was in the script.
In the script, right? And so he said, "Well, okay, I'll just draw Kirk's head there then."
Okay, well that helps explain it away. I like the fact that it's there. I was amused by it. The floating disembodied Kirk head, it doesn't fit exactly in the text box either. It kind of protrudes off the top of it. So definitely a stylistic choice.
And I gotta say, I love the sound effects for all of these. These iron miner ships in that panel, like shoom and swoosh and wah 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 wah.
Yeah, I like the whoa 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 the best. I think of all of those. It's a great engine sound.
Yes,
for a starship. So another thing that happens on this page that I wanted to quickly bring up, and this is something that keeps happening over and over and over again in Gold Key, is they keep making up these entities, these organizations that exist either in Starfleet or aside from Starfleet. And Sulu mentions the FPS, which translates to the Federated Planet Security. So, does the word federated mean that it's part of the Federation? We've never heard of the Federated Planet Security before, but apparently it's some kind of a police detail that's been dealing with these pirates, right?
Yeah, and it came across to me like they meant Federation, but that like for some reason they went with Federated instead. Kind of like maybe they just hadn't watched enough the show. But I kind of like the way that I did with, mentally replacing iron with dilithium. I just mentally replaced Federated with Federation, and then it was like, oh, okay.
Makes sense. Makes more sense then.
Yeah.
So I love these things about Gold Key, and I'm always amused to find them as I'm reading through these issues. And so here's another instance where spacewalking is something they can do so much more easily in the comic books than they could have ever done on the original series. So we've seen them spacewalk a couple of times before, and now it seems like a nonchalant sort of thing where Kirk and Scotty are like, okay, let's just put on some spacesuits and jump out an airlock and go check this thing out. They don't transport over in the spacesuits. They actually go and spacewalk over.
Right. Well, I mean, in the Gold Key comics, they seem to have no problem with just, bringing the Enterprise as close as possible to, a planet or any other kind of, object out in space. So it kind of makes it so that the distance between the Enterprise and the whatever the object is, in this case, an asteroid, is a lot more achievable, in a spacesuit.
So a lot happened in this initial part that I read through, and I think I go all the way up to page 10 with this, and so this whole sequence is pretty drawn out over the course of the 32 pages of the comic. So I make a couple of stops on a few of these pages to point out some very cool panels that I really enjoyed looking at. So page 7, panel 3, for you guys, page 6. I think there's a really cool shot here on this third panel. It spans the entire width of the page, where we see the bridge crew getting jostled around the Enterprise bridge. I really like that they're carrying over something that's really iconic from the original series, and seeing the camera tilt game they always played to show, to make the audience believe that the ship was being jostled around. So we're doing it again in the comic. And you've got a really cool, color-wise it's not right, but you've got a really cool depiction of Captain Kirk's chair on the bridge here, as well as some railings that look about right, and the helm console that looks pretty close as well. Yeah. So a very good representation of the bridge.
Yeah, and even Spock's station at in the back there. It's got that same kind of curved control panel like the Enterprise bridge had.
It does.
It's really well done. Again, the coloring could have been a little bit better, but I really like that shot. It's one of those ones where Giolitti is back on point with doing the Enterprise interiors right, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I do too. I that's why I had to bring this panel up, because this is a nice return to form after seeing the improper transporter room in the previous issue.
Yep.
The next panel down from here, I love this explosion.
Yeah.
That looks great. Really great. I'm not sure about the sound effects.
Asteroid being kawoom. Yeah. Yeah, but the asteroid being broken apart into smaller and smaller pieces. It just it's very striking.
In the background, the gold, the yellow, and then how it fades into orange with the black action lines around the outside. Yeah. I think it looks really, really good. It's a great action shot. Definitely conveys exactly what's going on in the picture here, as opposed to some of the things we've seen in a few of the prior issues where we were a little bit questionable about what was really going on.
Can I just say though that the situation on this page is very un-Star Trek like, because he's give him props to saying, oh well, we would prefer to avoid combat, and then the next panel is the pirate ship firing at the Enterprise but missing, and yet missing is apparently enough for Kirk to order them to just completely destroy the ship.
That was a pretty extreme reaction.
Right.
I have to admit.
Yeah, maybe ratchet that down a couple there, Kirk.
Yeah, lower that phaser power down a little bit. Maybe 30% phaser power instead of 100%. Right. So, well, then again, that pirate ship that was disguised as an asteroid may not have had any kind of adequate shielding. It was probably meant for, mining, as opposed to combat. And stealth. So maybe the Enterprise's phasers, even on a lower setting, were enough to rupture the hull and cause it to explode. So
could have been, but Kirk does explicitly order them to destroy the rogue ship.
That's true. Fair enough.
It still seems just a little bit extreme to me.
Yeah, definitely extreme knee-jerk reaction for Kirk. That's not something we would have seen him do normally as an in-character thing on TOS. But, I have to point out, too, that on page 8, in the second panel, there are two very familiar-looking figures in this depiction. There are 4 characters here. There's 3 men and a woman. 2 of the guys on either side of the frame don't look familiar at all, but the woman in the center looks an awful lot like Janice Rand to me, and the man in the center looks an awful lot like Chekhov to me.
Yeah.
Although they're not named.
Fully agree. That was exactly my impression of that, and I like to think it was them.
I do too, and Janice Rand has not appeared since the first issue of Gold Key, and we haven't seen a hell of a lot of Chekhov. We've heard him name drop before, but it's a very interesting thought that Giolitti would have used their likenesses for these unnamed random one-off characters.
And who aren't being spoken to.
No.
It seems like the 2 guys on the end are just talking to each other, just by the, not just the art, they're looking right at each other, but, they mention each other by name, Crad and Xana. It seems like they're just in the background to be like, hey, remember, we're on the Enterprise and we've got Enterprise crew on board. Which is cool though, because that it grounds it in Star Trek.
It does. Even though Janice seems to be in a poor proportion to the 2 guys in the foreground. Her head seems a little bit big.
Yeah, she's just being giant.
Yeah. Let's see, what else? So, page 8, panel 4 mentions something called the Federated Planet Supreme Headquarters, and Kirk is ordered to return to Starship Central.
Yeah. So, Starship Central sounds very kind of first season Star Trek, before they settled on Starfleet and the Federation. But the Federated Planet Supreme Headquarters, it's like, okay, Federated Planets, it's another one of those, just replace Federated with Federation, and I'm cool. But Supreme Headquarters, that sounds like more like something, say, that the Klingons would have, a Supreme Headquarters,
Yeah, it's the qualifying word, Supreme. Doesn't seem very Federation-like to me.
Right.
Yeah. That seems almost Romulan or, as you said, Klingon.
Yeah.
For sure.
And then there's the last panel where Scotty asks him, what do you make of it, Captain? And Kirk says, ours is not to reason why, and then explicitly goes on to say, that's a 19th century Earth poet named Tennyson. It's like, thanks, Captain Exposition.
Well, he has to make sure everybody knows where the reference is from and how learned he is.
Right.
What a consumer of poetry Captain
Right.
Kirk is.
Uh,
Did you
Gave me a
find
good
it
laugh though.
odd? Did you find it odd that on the next page, in the first panel, as Kirk and the crew are arriving at the Federated Planets Supreme headquarters, that they're descending a staircase from a ship?
Yeah. Like I kind of get the feeling that it's meant to be descending from the Enterprise, but I mean, it looks like the gangway off of a plane, and they're just
Mm-hmm.
walking off the plane onto the tarmac, kind of.
Yeah,
And
exactly what I thought about it. And they're not beaming down, they're not coming out of a hatch on the side of a shuttlecraft like we've seen the Galileo before.
yeah,
So this seemed very like a very odd choice to me to have them descending a gangway off of what looks to be an airplane or some sort of a craft.
yeah, I absolutely agree. Um, and the security forces here, the security officers, they kind of did a helmeted thing like the security officers that you see in say Star Trek 3, but the way that they looks a lot more like that kind of dystopian sci-fi totalitarian police state kind of
Yes.
uniform.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I couldn't classify it in my head as I was reading this, but that is a perfect way to put it. Yeah, those helmets with the wraparound chin strap type thing that they have, and the matching color uniform.
Yeah, and my association with that kind of sci-fi also makes it feel a little out of place, like the same kind of out of place as Super headquarters.
Yeah, because these are supposed to be Federation security guards.
Right.
So I don't see why Federation security guards would be dressed this way. So yeah, I completely agree. It's very off, but it almost made me think if the helmets were a little more uh maybe pointed at the top, maybe, or extended a little bit off the top of their heads, they'd look more Romulan than
Oh yeah,
human. Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
But there is a very subtle thing, though. You notice on the fronts of their helmets, they've got what looks like a little delta shield.
Oh, right. Look at that. Let me zoom in a little. Yeah, you're right. It looks like, I don't think it is, but it looks like a Delta shield.
Well, I feel like it is because
Yeah?
it's the way that he draws them on the uniform in that same panel, on panel 2 there.
Oh, right.
It's symmetrical rather than the asymmetrical arrowhead that
You
it
know
should
what? You're
be.
right.
And so that makes me feel like Giolitti was putting that logo on there.
Good call. You're right. Yeah, now that I'm taking a look at, what is it, panel number 2 on this page, looking at Kirk's Delta shield and the way that those helmet shields are drawn, yeah, they are very similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, good call on that. So I really love the shot of Kirk standing alone in this
Yeah.
large council hall at the bottom of this page. It's very sparse, but I think the table and 2 chairs at the bottom look very TOS to me.
Oh yeah.
It definitely feels like this would have fit. This is probably what a council chamber would have looked like in TOS if they had done one on the show.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it kind of looks like that Federation Council chamber in the beginning of Star Trek 4, but if it had been a lot bigger of a set, like this is the kind of thing that they would have done.
Yeah, for sure. It doesn't look like some of the other council chambers we've seen, like the Klingon ones. So it actually, you know what? It almost may have fit the TMP era as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, totally. And again, it does feel very kind of 1970s, and definitely in a good way. I like it. I like the design. Good on Giolitti.
Yeah, and you know what? And good on Giolitti too. On the next page, there's a couple of shots where we see from behind Kirk's head, we see varying shots of the 3 judges sitting above him, and there's a protruding piece that's sticking out that matches perfectly with the prior shot from the prior page. So he definitely kept the same style of the room in mind There's some continuity there that I really like.
Yeah, and it's just a really cool aesthetic, I thought.
Very cool aesthetic. And one more note before we try to move on, or we can take a look at these aliens. They're Federation members, but there are two decidedly non-humanoids on this council that's judging Kirk. One is a Caucasian version of the merman from the cover.
Yep.
And the other, I have no idea.
It looks like a beak, but with kind of a mammalian head, like a human head.
Yeah,
like the cranium and the ears.
Yeah.
But then like a beak, and it's very strange. But we see aliens so rarely. Actual aliens, not just humans on another planet. That it was something that I just thought was cool.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's very cool, and it's a little bit of a departure for Gold Key. We don't see a lot of this kind of stuff so far in Gold Key, and most of the villains, as we had joked about many issues ago, were bald white guys.
Yeah.
So it's kind of neat to see at least. Well, one of these guys is a bald white guy, but he's a bald white bird guy.
Yeah, and I think the white guyness, to coin a new adjective, of this is really just another symptom of the primitive color separation that they were able to do at the time. I feel like if they were going to color these days, they'd totally make that merman kind of guy match the coloration on the cover with the green skin and the red eyes, and they'd probably do something a little bit different. I'd say probably, if it was me, I'd probably make his beak kind of orangish, like a raven's, or a crow. Which one has the orange beak? I forget. Anyway, and just done something a little bit different. And I probably also would have not put them in blue, because the blue makes them look like they're science officers.
Yeah,
and these guys are supposed to be, in a sort of command function, just based on where the story's gone.
Agreed. I completely agree. Anything else you want to throw out there before we move on with the story?
No, let's get to it.
All right, so moving on. So there's some evidence presented that shows a video of Captain Kirk meeting with space pirates and apparently accepting some sort of extremely high bribe in the millions of dollars. I think it's like $7 million or something like that, right, Ian?
Yeah.
7 million. I forget. It's 7 million credits somewhere in here.
It did say credits.
Credits, right? But at any rate, so Kirk seems to be in an awful lot of trouble, although he is protesting quite a bit, and it is said that he is going to wind up being court-martialed for this, even though he believes he's been framed up. So jumping to another scene here, Spock, Scotty, and McCoy are having a meeting that lasts deep into the night, where Spock announces that he has volunteered the Enterprise to test some new navigation equipment so they can patrol this asteroid belt where they found the space pirates earlier. So they figure that while their attention is diverted by the court-martialing of Captain Kirk, the mining operations by the pirates would continue. So they could use some of this test equipment maybe to find them. So after using something called the Rattleizer, which is some sort of X-ray scanner, to examine various suspicious asteroids, they discover one which winds up being a pirate ship. So the pirate ship changes course and heads on a collision course to ram the Enterprise, and the Enterprise moves to avoid the ramming ship, which then takes off with the Enterprise in pursuit. So back in the city where Starfleet headquarters is located, Kirk visits an old doctor friend of his by the name of Dr. Wayne Stiller, who is pretty willing, strangely, to change Kirk's appearance with a cosmetic treatment called an electrosurgical procedure. Something you want to say?
I'll wait until we're done. But what he changes it in changes him into is just hilarious.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. Don't make me laugh now. So, Kirk's physical appearance, or his face anyway, is soon transformed into a native of a planet called Drid. So, using his newfound disguise, Kirk stages an elevator accident so that he can get to know a woman who is the secretary of Vice Chairman Fado, and winds up getting a coffee date with her. So, meanwhile, the Enterprise has overtaken the pirate ship when the crew notices that the bandits launched a missile toward a planet by the name of Kibo. So, on a hunch that the missile contains evidence that the pirates are trying to get rid of, the Enterprise crew decides to go to Kibo and retrieve it. So, once there, Spock explains that the planet is bathed in a deadly energy, so that no living thing can venture there and live. So, Spock decides that he and Dr. McCoy should use apparatuses called Cerebots to get a hold of this evidence so that they can survive this high energy field, this deadly high energy field. So the Cerebots are in fact robots, which are capable of housing the recorded brain patterns of a human being. So they essentially become the robot. So Spock and McCoy are transferred into these two robots and leave their bodies in stasis in sickbay to go to retrieve this evidence. So let's stop here. This is a tough one to follow. There's a captain's log here before we jump into any of this stuff that we've been talking about that I'll read off. So this is captain's log 1926.3. This is Captain Kirk speaking, saying from the planet's surface where he's in captivity, saying, I have the freedom of the city and a limited time in which to fight back against the charges aimed at me. What I need desperately is the information and the anonymity with which to gain it. So, God, there's so much here, Ian. So, since you were chuckling a little bit, I'll throw to you.
Well, so I wanted to start off first with just talking about the hotel strategy meeting.
Yeah.
Which was a little weird that they're just in a hotel. If they're back on Earth, just go to one of their houses. Kirk lives in San Francisco. And I love the very casual Spock sitting down.
Yeah, he's chilling, man. He's got his legs crossed.
He is chillaxing.
Oh, Jesus. McCoy is pacing.
Right.
And Scotty's doing like a Zoolander pose.
Right. Yeah, he can't turn left. And so then, they go to that back to the asteroid belt, and when they find the thing, they scan it with the rattleizer. And McCoy, oh my God, his thing. Guess again, you oatmeal-headed Scotsman.
Yeah, I was going to mention the fact that, and this, this is on page 13, panel 5, of page 12 for you. McCoy calls Scotty an oatmeal-headed Scotsman.
So absurd.
Yeah, more very, very bizarre dialogue choices here in Gold Key.
I mean,
God,
green-blooded hobgoblin is one thing, but oatmeal-headed Scotsman?
Yeah, I mean, I really wish that I had kept track of some of the really, really weird things that have been said, or used as insults, rather, in Gold Key, because there's so many of them, and I'm having trouble recalling them all. But this really fits in line with some of the bizarre dialogue choices that have happened so far in Gold Key up to now, and it makes me optimistic looking forward. I'm really hoping that there's more of this stuff in the future.
Oh yeah, me too. And then God, I can't stop laughing because when they change Kirk into the Duridian, he looks still just like Kirk, but with an afro.
Yeah. Oh God, I was gonna mention the same thing. That is not much of a disguise.
Right.
It's like they supposedly, if you read the panels where he's being altered, it states that it makes his skin on his face into actually, here, I'll read it verbatim. It says, but in less than half a minute, your skin will be as malleable as clay. So are
Yeah.
we to believe that his skin was made clay-like and somebody molded it to look different? And why does that change his hairstyle?
Right. And not his face.
Yeah, it's so weird. So weird.
It is. It's really bizarre.
Yeah, and I was going to say that, he gets up off this table and he's looking into a mirror, he's seeing himself, and literally the next panel is this staged elevator accident.
Right.
So we have no setup whatsoever that it literally, he gets up off the table, he says, "Magnificent, now I've got to get moving. There's a young lady I'm dying to meet." The next panel says, later, in the elevators of a 200-story complex called Government House, there's a woman and she's grabbing onto Kirk and she's like, "We're falling. The car is out of control. Yeah." So
Yeah.
what a jump. I mean, that is such a huge and completely disconnected chain of events.
Yeah. Like maybe if they had not spent so much time dueling with the pirates, they could have maybe dropped in a little Chekhov's gun there to introduce her, or at least set her up.
Yeah, really.
Because it's just like, look, sir, droids. That kind of moment of just, okay, now they're in this elevator with this woman that he apparently is dying to meet. It almost makes you feel like he got the thing, just because knowing Kirk, right? It almost makes you feel like he got the plastic surgery just to like go on a date.
Yeah. Well, that's essentially what he did, more or less. There's a little bit more to it later, but yeah, it seems like he got the plastic surgery just so that he could stage this elevator accident. Yeah, very, very weird. So let's see, moving a little bit ahead here. Actually, wait a minute. This is one page back from where we just were. I wanted to just point out, and I'm sure that you noticed this, on page 15, which is 14 for you listeners, Kirk is standing in front of this secretary in what I think looks just like what an office would have looked like in the 60s or 70s.
Absolutely.
Not in the 23rd century. There are file cabinets there. There are papers stacked there. A lamp, curtains on the. I mean, it looks to me like what this office would have looked like in the late 60s and early 70s. So this is definitely not in the same style as some of the other areas of Starfleet headquarters that we've seen in prior panels.
Yeah, it definitely clashes with your expectations.
For sure. I'm wondering where exactly this is. So are we to believe that this is somewhere nearby to those council chambers, those TMP-looking council chambers that we've seen?
Yeah. Well, because the only thing I can really think of is that I'm assuming this is all taking place in San Francisco, just because, that's where Starfleet headquarters is and all that. And something that I would hope San Francisco would do would be to, keep a lot of those older buildings like they do even today. Like those old Victorian houses and that kind of thing. And that this particular doctor has his office in a super old building. The office accoutrements, the computerless desk and the filing cabinets with papers and all of that is still a little off, but at least the building that they're in, I could get. And if it's, if it isn't in San Francisco and it just happens to be in a really old building, sure. But it's still just, it's jarring, isn't it?
It really is. Maybe making myself feel a little bit better. Maybe, like you said, this is a historical landmark and law forbids them to change anything about it. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe this is a really
even the
old
office
building.
equipment.
Yeah, they can't do anything differently in that building. It's a historical landmark. Ian, this is something that I thought about at length, but wound up having to put out of my head because I couldn't make sense of it. So McCoy and Spock are put into stasis while the Cerebots that their brains have been copied into, or their brainwaves have been copied into, are out doing their thing. Now, it's specifically stated in this comic book that copies of their brains are put into these robots. So why would their physical bodies need to be in stasis? It's not like they took their consciousness and transferred it into a robot body. They literally copied it and pasted it into the robot. So I don't really get why Spock and McCoy couldn't be doing stuff on the ship while their robot copies are out getting this evidence, right? Did you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they did, according to the dialogue anyway, they did a copy, not a move.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird that they would even have to, do that kind of an operation. Why not just remote control the robots via telepresence,
Good point.
Which, then you'd have yet another instance of a remote control Spock, and who wouldn't love that?
We would all love that, especially Jim Morehouse.
And it would seem to be a lot less risky. Scotty complains about how they give him headaches. Mm-hmm. Just remote control them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, speaking of giving them headaches, I absolutely love, this is maybe one of my favorite Gold Key panels that I've seen in all of the issues we've covered. On page 18, the second panel where their brains are getting transferred, it looks like their consciousness is being vacuumed out of their heads. Yes. I love it. It is so brilliant. So brilliant. Yep. Oh, Giolitti, I would love to shake your hand because this is such a great panel. I wish all of you out there could see this right now. It is great. Absolutely great. And I have to remember to take a screen grab of this and post it because it literally looks like there's some sort of a vacuum. And the hoses that attach to their heads look just like vacuum hoses.
Yeah. Yeah, like those old pig-style vacuum cleaners.
Yeah, and I love that they're saying "arg" at the same time. So, and even Scotty is saying "ugh." I can't even bear to watch that thing
at work.
Oh my god, brilliant!
Yeah,
brilliant. So go ahead. Anything else you want to throw out there about this section?
The only thing is just that. Scotty does sort of clear a little something up for us, and that's that the electro prober, which does the copy operation, gives them a little bit of brain shock, and that's why they're unable to do anything.
So do you think brain shock is one of those terms that would have been softened over the years, like shell shock got softened? Into, PTSD. What would brain shock have been softened into?
Oh boy, that's a really good question. Maybe post brain sucky dramatic. I can't even.
Oh man, it's funny. I love the term brain shock, and I love the fact that Scotty, who is the chief engineer, is the one who's calling it brain shock. You would think that was something that McCoy would say.
Yeah,
right? It's a
except
medical term.
McCoy's already taken off in his robot body.
Yeah, oops.
So,
So speaking of which, wouldn't it have made a hell of a lot more sense for Spock and Scotty to go
yeah.
and
Oh,
have
yeah, it would have.
McCoy there to monitor?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Because
really.
they're, bodies who have undergone a medical procedure. Yeah, it would absolutely make sense.
Yeah. So, and where's Nurse Chapel in all of this? She's still recovering from the last issue and being
Yeah.
assaulted by a knight with a spear.
Uh-huh.
Anything else before we move along?
No, I am anxious to get to
The
to
end?
Afro Kirk's date.
Yeah. Well, perfect. Next up is Afro Kirk's date. So, the disguised Captain Kirk has a coffee date with Vice Chairman Fado's secretary and learns that Fado is ambitious and intends on ascending to the post of chairman by smashing the iron smuggling ring and indicting Captain Kirk at the same time. So Kirk also learns that the videotape that incriminated him was filmed by accident by an amateur photographer by the name of I'm going to stumble over this one, Nuri Jakars, while he was on
Mister.
vacation. On vacation.
Oh, I see. Nuri. I thought you said Muri, like with an M as in Mike.
No, Nuri.
I was looking at the wrong panel.
Sorry about that. So, with this newfound information, Kirk sneaks into Nuri Jakar's home, where he finds that Jakars was a professional special effects photographer. Kirk searches the house further and finds 2 film cartridges, one that contains Kirk and the other of the smuggler by the name of Lidgy Bragg. They were combined by Jakar's expertise to form the video evidence of Kirk's supposed meeting with Bragg. And just as Kirk makes the discovery, Nuri Jakars appears behind him with phaser in hand pointed at Kirk's head, threatening to blow Kirk's brains out. And above the surface of the dangerous planet Kibo, don't forget that McCoy and Spock are now in these robot bodies. The Cerebots are flying on jetpacks after this missile containing the evidence was fired by the bandit ship. So when it touches down, they quickly retrieve it and are about to depart when one of the some giant amorphous energy dragon called a Dragon of Endora approaches them. They're pretty stunned by the fact that this dragon is there. In fact, I think one of them remarks that they never thought they'd see one of these dragons in real life. The 2 of them phaser this monster repeatedly and eventually wind up destroying it. But during the process, the Cerebot that McCoy's brain copy is inhabiting is blown up and the head of it is left there. And Spock grabs the head and flies back off towards the Enterprise. So, Ian, why don't you take helm on this part?
Oh, boy. So, Afro Kirk has his dinner, and you get a nice close-up where it clearly looks like Kirk, just with an afro. But at the same time, the coffee thing really does give him a good lead. So he decides that he's going to go over and sneak into Nuri Jakar's house. But then his act of sneaking in, that 4th panel on page 19, page 18 for everyone else, it's just an awkward pose.
Yeah, I think he's supposed to be descending from the skylights, but the way it's drawn, it doesn't look like that.
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to lower yourself down like that? It's just his arms are behind his head, and it's weird looking. But then I gotta say, I kind of love the special effects house here that this Jakar's guy runs. And he walks by what looks almost like the bottle city of Kandor from Superman.
Yes.
But like all these little kind of miniature cityscapes and landscapes.
Yes.
I thought
Cool
that was
models.
really cool.
It is.
Exactly.
It's very cool.
I almost, wish that they had kind of dwelled on them a little bit more, just because I like them so much.
I agree. So, and I also like the fact that Kirk is operating on page 20, is operating something that looks like a film projector. There are obviously two reels attached to it.
Right. He says it's a strange projector, or the narrator says it's a strange projector, but yeah, it's totally just a normal looking projector.
Yeah. A film projector, no less, which probably would not exist in Star Trek times. But but that's okay.
Yeah, we'll let that one slide.
We'll let it slide. And did you notice on page 21 the look on disguised Kirk's face when he's kind of looking back over his shoulder to see this phaser pointed at his head? He's just like, eh.
Yeah, here you go.
Yeah, whatevs. Really strange look on his face, but kind of a cool look. I wish I could be that cool when someone had a gun pointed at my head.
Right. And the dialogue, you've got it all wrong, chum. I'm Bexel Redexa of DIN, Drid Interstellar News.
What a great cover story. He's a news reporter breaking into this guy's house.
Right, like that excuses it.
Yeah,
he's a news reporter. That's why he's breaking and entering.
Yeah, looking for an interview. I really do like, though, on page 21, the third panel of the Cerebots flying
going over the planet Endora.
Yeah, God, that's great. Those swirls, the pinkish and white swirls, purple that are at the top of that frame. I love the form. I love the fact that it looks like there's a kind of a wispy cloud action, and you see the two Cerebots with the trails behind them from the jetpacks, flying over this planetary body.
Yeah, and then they get to the missile, which it looks like a missile, like as people would have known. Yeah. It does kind of look like a pre-Apollo missile, with the fins and everything.
Yep.
Kind of in keeping with the Candor thing, you kind of expect them to pull out a Kryptonian baby from it. But and then there's the dragon of Nidora.
Oh yes.
And I kind of feel like they could have gone a little bit further with it. Tentacles, sure.
I don't see where the word dragon comes into this. The name dragon, it does not look like a dragon at all. It's an amorphic blob with tentacles.
Yeah.
And not even all that threatening. I mean, what is it gonna do to you? It's gonna kick you with its legs. It has no apparent head, so there's no mouth. It's got no barbed tail. It's got no.
Well, it does. It's got a little energy discharge, like an electric eel, kind of.
Yeah.
But kudos to coming up with, strange new life.
Oh, I love the fact that they did this. It's another non-humanoid alien, so right up my alley.
But the name of it sets up an expectation that the art doesn't pay off with.
Exactly, and not only does the word dragon not fit, but what's Endora?
That's the planet that they're on. Remember, the pirate ship shot the missile to this planet to kind of distract them so that they could get away.
Good call.
And there's a little bit of what's the word I'm looking for? Pride on this part of Spock that seems a little out of character for Spock. I lay claim to one of those hits, Doctor.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, good point. I didn't even think of that until you just said it. Yeah, that sounds like a little bit of hubris on the part of Spock.
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, that Spock, you would expect to just sort of brush that off. You wouldn't brag about it.
Yeah, he wouldn't want credit.
Yeah, he'd just be like, whatever, let's just take this thing down.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I do, here's another question. Speaking of the Cerebots and the fact that these contain copies of the brainwaves, why is it necessary for Spock to grab a hold of the disembodied robot head of McCoy to bring it back to the ship if it's just a copy of McCoy? I mean, shouldn't McCoy be perfectly fine back on the ship?
Ding. Yeah. It is that exact thought crossed my mind as well. And he makes it. They make the point in dialogue, what are you doing this for? I'm nothing but a pack of electronic circuits anyway. Yes, but I'm sentimentally attached to those circuits, Doctor, which would be out of character for Spock again.
Totally, yeah.
It's just weird.
Yeah, very weird.
And there's bringing his head up doesn't serve any purpose. The next time we see Spock and McCoy, they don't even mention it. I feel like it was just to kind of raise the stakes a little bit by keeping Spock on there for one extra panel, but it just it seems kind of pointless.
It really does,
and out of character.
It both. Yeah, I completely agree, and I was scratching my head thinking about this one panel, and this is for you guys out there listening. This would be page 22, panel 4 for you. You see Spock. He's also, as he's flying away from the planet, holding McCoy's head. He's also holding some sort of a metal rod in his hand. So,
yeah, well, that's what they pulled out of.
Yeah, the evidence.
Yeah, so the incriminating record.
Yeah, the incriminating record, and yeah, he's flying back to the Enterprise, and here's the actual dialogue from McCoy's disembodied head says, "Mr. Spock, you're crazy. This hunk of scrap robot will just slow you down. I'm nothing but a pack of electronic circuits anyway."
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, weird dialogue choices, but all right, at any rate, you have anything else you want to talk about before we get on to the closing of this?
No, just that boy, I wish they had just rewritten that whole scene.
I do too. But this is what we've got to deal with.
Yep, you get what you get and don't get upset.
All right, so moving along. All right, back in the city, Kirk is able to convince Nuri Jakars that he actually is a news reporter who is trying to do a feature story on him. So allowing him to leave, Kirk takes off, but not too long after that, his face returns to normal, which we had no indication that this was not a permanent surgery, did we? Did it say it was temporary?
No.
I don't think it did.
No. I mean, we assumed that he was going to reverse it before he got back to the Enterprise, but my assumption was just that it was going to be he'd go back to the surgery and he'd zap him with the malleable clay face thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then do that way, that it would undo itself, like like Cinderella and the clock
like
chiming midnight
spell, right?
That was a little odd.
Yeah, I agree. So, and of course, plot convenience would have it. So, just as Kirk's face reverts back to normal, Vice Chairman Hajara, who was hanging out outside of Jakar's home, sees Kirk and gets the drop on him with a phaser pistol. So Kirk is captured and led back inside by Hajara. Once inside, Kirk explains that their scheme has worked very well, and they had him convinced the whole time that Vice Chairman Fado was the one that was framing him. So Hajara is still pointing the phaser at Kirk, exclaims, "Of course, I couldn't afford to do it myself for fear that the doctored tapes of you might be exposed." So Kirk continues to unravel this plot while he stalls for time. He confirms that Jarrah promised a huge sum of money to Bragg, the pirate, to implicate Kirk. So, and also if the doctored tapes were discovered, Fado would be removed, paving the way for Hajara to take over. So with the plan exposed, Hajara decides that he's going to have to opt for another plan, and that plan is the disgraced Captain Kirk, the starship commander, who is now facing court-martial, would commit suicide taking his own life. So Kirk decides that he's got nothing else to lose and pushes over one of the miniature underwater city special effects models, spilling water onto Hajara, knocking him off balance, and then Kirk takes that opportunity to hurl a giant table
Yeah.
at Hajara, knocking him out. So later, we find Kirk back in the Supreme Hall with Hajara and Fado present, and Kirk is pronounced innocent based on the evidence that he's recovered and the records recovered by the Starfleet, by the Enterprise crew, and the Council and Hajara have been disgraced, and they're going to try to figure out how to repair the public distrust that has been sown by these egregious acts. So outside in the hallway, Kirk thanks Spock and McCoy for the great work that they've done and the friendship that they've displayed for him, and hopes that he is able to do the same for them in the future. But then Spock, in a very strange and uncharacteristic way, says that though no lab test would show it, we are blood brothers, Captain. So, and then in a final act of comedy, Fado's secretary comes by and says, "I'm going to have to give you all a day to apologize for the stunt you pulled." And we got a little another McCoy joke to round this out, saying that, yeah, they're blood brothers and chums to the end. And then Spock says, "Well then, Doctor, I guess there are some things even brothers don't share," which I don't really get. Did you get that reference?
Yeah.
Were they talking about Kirk macking on the secretary? Is that what that was about?
Maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of went over my head as well.
Yeah, I feel like I'm missing something there. So
yeah,
Kirk,
like a punchline.
yeah. Oh, yeah, good one. So Kirk takes grabs a hold of a table that looks bigger than he is. And
Yeah, much bigger.
Hurls it like a weapon. Did that stand out to you as strange?
Yeah, I mean that's something that you would have expected Spock to be able to do, but not a mere human like Kirk.
No. Good call. Yeah, that seemed a little out of the realm of possibility for Kirk. I mean, I'm sure he could have toppled the table, but
Yeah,
picking
that
it
part
up
was
and
I was totally
hurling
on
it
board with.
across the room seems a little bit strange to me. So, and let's, well, I mean, the Blood Brothers thing, I don't even know what to say about that. That is definitely not something Spock would have ever said. I don't even know if Spock may be familiar with the concept of what blood brothers were just by studying human history, but I really doubt that he would ever call himself a blood brother to Kirk.
Yeah. It's just the handling of Spock in this issue was not done well. He just does not seem in character.
No, not at all. And we've had this problem with Spock in prior issues.
Yeah.
Too. I mean, he solves problems, yes, which is definitely Spock-like, but I think the problem for me is that he's decidedly not Vulcan in a lot of his comics.
Yeah, and the other thing about this ending is, once again, the ending just feels rushed, like they wasted too much time earlier in it. We've got 3 pages. The evidence that they brought back is just mentioned in one panel. The uncovering of the plot is, essentially just one page, kind of spread out over 2 pages, but the number of panels is just 1 page's worth. And then you've got 4 panels for taking out the bad guy, 3 panels for the coda. It's just very, very rushed.
It is. And there's a lot of things that I felt in this comic that were essentially pointless to include in the first place. So one of the big ones that stands out to me that we wasted some time with was, why would the space pirates have evidence on board their ship to prove this plot existed? And when being chased down, why would they choose to launch that evidence in a missile in a way that would be recoverable by someone else, why wouldn't they just destroy it?
Well, that part I think is that they weren't banking on the Enterprise having any of these, cerebrots or cererobots or whatever um, on board because they send it to this planet where no one can live or whatever. But even then, it's like the Enterprise has transporters. Just lock onto the signal, beam it aboard. The whole felt like a completely different story than the whole conspiracy thing. And it felt like they just had these two stories that just mashed together. And, you just had this sort of mess in the middle where they kind of overlap occasionally.
Exactly. So, I mean, the pirates are in cahoots with people at Starfleet headquarters. So they should be well aware of the technology that's available to the Enterprise crew, i.e. transporters, shuttlecrafts, tractor beams, all sorts of things that they could have used to retrieve said evidence. So it didn't make sense. I mean, it would have been a very obvious thing that the Enterprise could have used a tractor beam to lock onto the missile that had been fired and capture it before it even hit the planet. So it just seems very weird to me that and unnecessary that the pirates would have tried to jettison that information instead of just destroying it. It doesn't seem to make a hell of a lot of sense. And I think one of the biggest problems with this issue is the waste of time in the beginning of the issue where you took almost 10 full pages just messing around in the asteroid field and ferreting out that one pirate ship and destroying it. That the pacing again,
which didn't come up off at all.
No,
like I thought when I first saw him destroy that, and you remember me talking about how that seems really un-Starfleet like. I thought that was what he was going to be on trial for.
Right? Yes,
was the destruction of this ship,
and that would have made a lot more sense.
And then they don't even reference that he does it except for one panel where he's like, unfortunately, no defense short of total destruction was possible, Commander Dar. Oh, too bad.
No one cares.
That's it.
They were just poachers anyway. Who cares?
Right. Yeah. It's like the pirate angle, the pirate story should have been its own issue, I think, and the trial story should have been its own issue. And had each of those stories had their own issues to expand with, I think they would have been a lot better. But the smushing of them all together into just 25 pages just doesn't work on this one.
Completely agree. So am I correct in stating that you will go non-essential on this one? Non-canon, non-essential, rather?
Well, part of me wants to rate it essential because we apparently get back to Earth and we get to see stuff like the council hall and all of that. But the story just doesn't work well enough for me to actually give it an essential rating. So yeah, I'm going to go with non-essential on this one.
I see. I'm going to agree with the non-essential, and I would have given this an essential vote if we were apprised of the races of the two non-human aliens that appear as Starfleet Council members. That would have been very cool if they had gone ahead and just given us the names of the planets they came from or the races that they belong to as an introduction to an alien race. That would have been really cool. But as it stands now, they're just two strange-looking Starfleet members who are yet unidentified. So that would have been really cool. And so unfortunately, it's a double non-essential again for this Gold Key issue. And it's a shame that the story had to be so disjointed and difficult to follow. And I think your ideas of it having been split into two issues probably would have made it far more readable.
Absolutely. And, but I will say, if you want to read this for a good laugh, I mean, where else are you going to see Afro Kirk?
Yes, that's
like,
true.
Pick it up, read it. You'll laugh your butt off. But But yeah, otherwise, you're not missing a whole lot.
No, and it's kind of a rare misstep for Arnold Drake, I think.
Yeah, I fully agree. And it's it's the kind of thing where had he just split it into two, I'll bet that he would have been able to do great stuff with both of those different plots. But
Okay.
I feel like it was just the mashing of them together was what did him in.
Yeah, I agree. And and this is one of those instances where I really, really wish we had a Mark Cushman book about the making of Gold Key Comics, because
Oh yeah, would that be great?
I would venture to guess that there was more to this story than would fit in the comic, and it got trimmed down for whatever reason. So it would be fascinating if Mark Cushman, if you're listening, think about maybe doing a Gold Key Comics book. I'm sure that's way off the radar, but it would be so cool to be able to get a little bit more of a background on what went into
Yeah.
the writing and illustration of these issues, and kind of shed some light on maybe what these issues may have been, or what the original writing was that got trimmed down, or whatnot, to fit the comic format. So all right, so Ian, awesome to talk through this issue with you.
Yeah.
I know that it wasn't the best issue in the world, but it's always fun. Plenty of great discussion topics.
Yep. I mean, it's still Star Trek.
It is still
You
Star
know.
Trek. We keep coming back to that same conclusion. It's always interesting to see new adventures of Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock and Dr. McCoy and the rest of the crew that we haven't
Yeah.
experienced before.
And that's the whole point of the original mission of the Tricorder transmissions. It's to go through all of the voyages of Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise. And even though this story might have fallen flat, it's still Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's another adventure that we were able to join them on. So
Exactly.
great stuff. And thank you out there in listener land for joining us on this adventure. We're always very happy to have you here with us, and we realize this was a long episode, so thank you for enduring it. And you can find more about us on the tricordertransmissions.com, facebook.com/the tricordertransmissions, and Twitter at TTT_pod. And we've got some merchandise up on redbubble.com. Make sure you jump over there if you're interested in Tricorder merchandise. Plenty of stuff
super
there.
good.
It is super good. And please, jump over and take a look at it. And, feel free to interact with us on social media. We love talking to all of you. And I so much enjoy the folks that chime in on our weekly episodes on our Facebook page. Have such great conversations with you guys. Love you all. Thanks so much. And if you feel like it, and it would be a great bonus to us if you could jump on over to iTunes and give our show a review over there. That would really mean a lot to us. It goes a lot into the rankings of shows and helps for the discoverability of the Tricorder transmissions. We've been around for 3+ years now, and we're always looking to bring in new listeners into the fold. So giving us a review, or even just a star rating on iTunes, minimal time investment. Just go there and click the stars to say how much you like the episodes, and that would go a long way. So thanks so much. Ian, anything else you want to say before we close up?
Yeah. I just want to say that this was really great getting to spend the 50th anniversary evening of Star Trek chatting Trek with you. I mean,
yeah, man.
Here we are, 50 years later. I don't think even Gene Roddenberry would have expected it to last this long when he first put pen to paper coming up with this whole thing. It's amazing. What a ride. I can't wait to see what happens to the next 50 years, assuming I'm around that long. Knock on wood. What an incredible world they created. And even better is just the friendship, all of the interconnections, the lives that have been changed, the pushes forward into the future. Everything that Star Trek has done has pretty much touched gold somewhere. It's I was just going to say it's just a real treat, and so you know, thanks for letting me talk Trek with you.
Nah, man, listen, it's my pleasure, and I absolutely love having you here. This has been such a great time talking to these comic books with you. I love getting in depth about Trek, and in my real life, I only have a small handful of people that I can talk Trek with. So, being able to sit down and talk Trek with all of my friends, like you and the other hosts of the Tricorder transmissions, and our friends on Twitter and Facebook, it adds a lot to my own life. And Star Trek has brought so much into all of our lives, and it's affected so many people. It's just it's such an amazing feeling to think that this franchise has been around this long and continues to grow and prosper even today, with new movies coming out, new series about to start, novels still being written, comic books still being released. So much material out there for Trek fans to discover, for new fans to discover and get into the older material. It's such a great self-propagating series now, and there's so much wonderful content. And even the content that is not as popular still has a lot of great stuff to think about and talk about. That's the beauty of Star Trek, is that it has so much meat in it for you to sink your teeth into and embrace and immerse yourself in. I'm in the middle of, I'm getting towards the tail end rather, of a Next Generation rewatch. And, I have talked about the Next Gen with so many of my friends, and they say, oh, well, it's such a mixed bag. But even the episodes that aren't that great still have some really fun stuff in them and some really great concepts. So, Star Trek is a wonderful franchise. I am so happy that we can be even a small part of it. Putting out these podcasts and talking to other Trek fans and community members. It feels so cool to be a part of this, and I'm glad that you're a part of this with us, Ian, and the rest of the Tricorder crew. It's been an incredible ride for us, and it's been an incredible ride as a Star Trek fan, seeing how the series has grown and changed and evolved over all of these years.
Couldn't agree more. May Trek continue to live long and prosper.
Yes, absolutely. Live long and prosper is one of my mantras in my own life. So, everybody out there, again, thank you all so much for listening to these shows. We love you all, and we hope you all continue to live long and prosper. And we will be back again next week with another episode of the Tricorder Transmission. So stay tuned, and we'll be back with you before you know it. Thanks again for listening.